And welcome to a new edition of Red Mountain Express. I am your host, Blake Westbrook. Joining me as always is Patrick Tucker. How you doing, Patrick?
I'm doing well, Blake. How are you?
Doing good. Matthew has got some family things to take care of today, and then JD's at a gig, right?
Yeah, I think he was playing tonight.
Yeah, so it's just me and you.
He has a legitimate excuse.
He does.
Matthew's trying to sell his house, so they were like, yeah, we've got to get out of the house.
Look, as someone who just sold their former home, I understand it. Although, in fairness, when our house went on the market, I was bird hunting. So I was out of the house.
So you're literally, like, gone.
I was in Georgia. Now, my wife had to ride around with our 2-year-old for...
What, during the showings?
During the showings. So, like, when we put the house, when we put the house on the market, I was in Georgia.
Yeah.
And then when we closed on the house, I was in Washington, D.C.
Nice. So you just avoided the whole
So I
thing.
just avoided the whole thing. It was great. It was very painless, the whole for me at least. For me, yeah.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah. So they're not here, and so it's just us two. And
if you're listening and you want to buy a nice house in Bluff Park, let us know.
Yeah, we have a great one. There's a great one for sale. We are actually back at our home base here in Pepper Place. We are recording at the Lumbar. I believe it was Riley's birthday this week, right?
Happy birthday, Riley.
Happy birthday, Riley. There's flowers on the table here in the incubator room. They're very beautiful.
And happy birthday balloons.
That are off the wall.
I think it's been her birthday week.
It has been her birthday week, I believe. So
I think they finally took them down.
So come by here this weekend during the farmers market, and if you see her, tell her we said happy birthday, and tell her yourself. So that'd be great.
And speaking of the farmers market, we will be set up with a table.
That's right.
Overlooking the farmers market. So
right.
And we're going to be recording an episode during the farmers market.
Yeah. So what we'll probably do is we'll probably interview a few folks from the farmers market and kind of walk around and maybe try to pull some folks out who are just shopping and just have your opinions on the farmers market, and then we'll probably publish that pretty soon.
So if you're out there this Saturday morning and you see us, stop by.
Yeah, you can't miss us. We're bearded gentlemen with microphones. Yeah, and we'll have koozies.
We'll be the only podcast there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I hope so. If there's someone else, it'd be like the Jets versus the Sharks.
Yeah. I've never seen that.
Yeah, you've never seen the West Side Story? Golly, man, get some culture in your life. But we will have koozies, right? We think. We think.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So if you see us and you say you like our podcast, or you just say hey to us, we'll probably give you a koozie.
Just be throwing them out.
Exactly. So, and this has nothing to do with Birmingham, but it has a lot to do with Iron, and Iron is Birmingham, but Game of Thrones returns. Finally, I'm so ready, man.
I've been rewatching on your account. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Don't listen to that at HBO. No, I've been rewatching. I think I made it through about season 1, and I think one of the writers or somebody put out if you need the Cliff's Notes version, like there are certain episodes that you need to see. So
yeah.
My coworker sent me that. Thanks, Mary. So I'm just gonna watch if I don't know that I can watch them all between now and then because I need to sleep. And the only time I get to watch these is after the kids go to bed. So I think I'm going to watch those particular episodes, and I'll maybe send that to you and put a link to that out there.
So there's a couple of guys I work with. One's my boss who took a couple of days off last week because I think he just took a couple of days off and started watching everything all the way through.
So he had never seen it before?
No, he had seen it.
Oh,
He's just rewatched it. And then another guy named Mike Lee. Mike listens to this podcast. He's rewatching it as well. And it is, Monday mornings at our office. It's, we're always like, where are you? Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you a funny story. A few years ago, it was the Red Wedding episode, and I was 2 episodes behind because I'd been traveling.
Spoiler alert here.
Yeah, spoiler alert. If you have never watched Game of Thrones and you're currently in the middle of it and you do not want to hear this, turn off this podcast or turn it down. You don't want to turn it off.
Yeah, just skip forward about 30 seconds.
Yeah, 45. You know how I talk. I can ramble. So we're the Red Wedding episode, The Reigns of Castamere was on, and my boss texts me and goes, oh my God, did you watch this? And I was like, I've told you I'm a couple episodes behind. He's like, all right, listen, here's the deal. I'm your boss. If you need to be a little late tomorrow because you need to catch up on this, I need someone to talk with us about tomorrow.
Okay,
So I watched it all, and then Megan was working at the hospital at the time. She got home at midnight, so then she watched it. So I watched that episode 2 or 3 times that night, and I was still at work at 8 o'clock to talk about it the next morning because it was such
That's not too much of a spoiler.
Not too much of a spoiler, but it's a very pivotal episode of the show. So So yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. I think Kahaba may be doing showings. I think they're going to do watch parties.
Oh, that's awesome.
Unofficial HBO, I'm sure, is not listening to our podcast.
But I think they want that. They do watch parties in Britain all the time, and they record people's reactions, and it's the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. Go YouTube it; it's awesome.
Somebody else said that they were cracking down on people, profiting off of showings or re-showings without doing I don't know if they do the proper licensing or whatever, but.
Anyway, it's one of my favorite shows. So
it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I think they've made more money off of just people rewatching it and like restreaming. I don't know.
I mean, they're milking this. Like, there's the Game of Thrones Oreos right now.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't even want to know what's inside of this.
No, it's the regular Oreos. Just the outside packaging is just Game of Thrones.
Oh, okay.
Can you? But nothing is like some Oreos and some milk. Watching people get beheaded on Game of Thrones. It's great.
That's exactly what I want to do.
Well, we have a good show. Later on the episode, in the second half, we have an interview with Julian Maha of KultureCity. They're a Birmingham-based nonprofit that deal with making places more sensory-friendly for not just people with autism, but with PTSD and other sensory issues. So we recorded that episode on Monday. He was fantastic. He was very generous. We actually were talking about this before we went on the air. We had the interview, and then we sat around and talked with him for another 30 minutes, and probably should have had that recorded because it was very enlightening.
Yeah, we really should. I mean, just he's very informative. They are doing incredible things all over the country and really all over the world now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they just keep expanding their reach and what they're able to do.
Like today, there was like 3 stories about different places around the country that have become sensory friendly. There's a KISS concert. KISS.
Yeah.
Like, they do fireworks during their show and fire and Gene Simmons, and that's sensory friendly now. I mean they're really and it's not just big events like that. I mean, churches and things like that are really starting to step up and do this. So
yeah, I mean, all over the place. But I was just impressed. I mean, like, they were at the New Orleans, I think the French Quarter Festival last weekend, helping to make that more sensory inclusive. They're just literally all over the country.
Yeah, and he's a doctor and still works in the ER.
Yeah, that's. You guys,
you'll hear that. You'll hear the interview. Yeah. Well, let's talk about some news, and then we'll get to that interview real quick. So the first news is kind of some sad news, but Farm Burger that's located in Southside recently closed. They closed this week, and I had never been there, but you'd been there, right?
I have been there. Unfortunately, I only got to go there maybe twice. The food was really, really strong. Everything was really good. I had no complaints about the place, which is unusual for me. But yeah, they closed. I think, maybe not the best location for the type of traffic that kind of establishment needs. And they're right across the street from Muyaz, I think.
Yeah, I think we talked about that. I mean, there was a burger joint, and there's a bunch of other restaurants around there as well, which is not an inherently bad thing, but it was also more of I'm trying to think of the word, it was more of a gourmet, would you say, kind of a burger type of deal?
Not overly. No, I mean, it was, I don't know what you call it, but for a standalone burger place, like there's a Craft Burger, and there's just several of these burgers. I feel like we've got a lot of burger places in this town now.
We do.
Well, we lost one. Flip closed.
Did Flip close?
Yeah, flipped out of there. So that place.
That's not funny, but it's funny.
No,
said that,
they still have their Atlanta store, but the one here in Birmingham at the Summit closed. Which I'm excited to see what goes in there because it's a cool space with a nice view.
Yeah, there's a good Chewy's up there, which I love Chewy's. I don't know if you
really.
Oh, it's great.
Anyway,
not a fan. Okay,
it's all right.
Well,
I like the free nachos or whatever, or the free.
The happy hour thing.
Happy hour,
dude, it's great. It's well, they posted on their Facebook that Sunday, April 7th was the last day of business for Farm Burger's Birmingham location at the Waits. We are grateful to the community and local vendors who have supported our mission for nearly 2 years and plan to return to the Birmingham market in the near future. So,
I think they're probably going to open up in a better space.
I think so too. I think at some point, you can find. I think some place like this, like here in Pepper Place, would have been good, or maybe
they'll show up in Pepper Place.
Hey,
that'd be cool.
That'd be really cool. Yeah. Second, which is actually good news, is an opening. over the old Silvertron location that we've talked about, which I love Silvertron. They closed last year when their owners returned to Italy. Well, a new cafe is going to open up in that area, and it's the folks that own the shop, the greenhouse, and
So it's literally called Shop, right?
yeah, it's really called Shop, yeah.
And it's right next door, basically, to Silvertron.
Right.
It's a really, really cool building and space, and so they're going to open up a cafe there.
Yeah, they'll have breakfast, lunch, teas, coffee, all the works.
They're not doing dinner, right?
I don't think so, no.
So, that kind of keeps them at a little bit less competition with Whistling Table and
Little Savannah.
Which is
fantastic,
right next door.
Yeah.
So I think this is great. I think a lot of people loved going to brunch at Silvertron, so hopefully they'll do brunch.
Yeah, and
bring that back to the area.
I want to say they're already working on the location because I think I saw on a Birmingham Instagram account that they were taking down the
old Silvertron sign.
Well, not the Silvertron sign, but the cover.
Awning.
The awning is gone, and so that's a cool looking building. It's old brick, and I've said this before. I'm a big old building person.
Yeah.
I think that the more that you use those buildings, the better. So it looks good. This is kind of the initial phase. They've kind of talked about they're going to open it up, and so I think that's good for the area. You didn't want a building like that to sit vacant for the longest time, especially when you have Little Savannah, and then there's I think there's a
Whistling Table,
and then across the street is
Rougarou.
And that's across the table as well. And then there's another. I want to say there's a antique store as well.
Yeah, there's some little shops over there.
Yeah, so it's a good area. So
Forest Park area.
Yeah,
Gets
so
a new cafe.
We'll follow
about that.
Yeah, we'll follow up on that story when they actually have some more information. But it's more details. I think it's right now. It's like in the initial stages of opening. The big story that kind of just came across our radar this afternoon before we got here is that the new stadium has got naming rights.
It's going to be, drum roll,
Protective Stadium.
Protective Stadium. So Protective Life is going to be the naming sponsor.
Right.
And it's Protective Stadium. I actually really like this. I think
Birmingham-based company, man.
Another Birmingham-based company. I love. I have no complaints about this. I don't even dislike the name.
Yeah, it is 15 years deal. They're going to pay $1 million per year, and I want to say that money is going to go directly into the neighborhood fund.
That's cool.
Yeah, and then there are also regions and some other companies are also going to do certain deals throughout the stadium for $500,000 a year for 10 years. So it's a good deal. You're starting to see the money get into the stadium, and then now they're going to finish up the design process because that's longer than it. That's the details or where you need to get everything finished, and then they're going to start building. I want to say later on in the summers when they're going to start breaking ground. They've already started prepping the area, but the real building and putting in the beams and stuff is going to go on later on this summer, maybe into the early fall. So that's great.
Yeah, excited about this. I mean, I think it's so cool to see local money going into this stadium. The money's there.
Yeah,
I think this is going to be a hugely successful stadium.
Well, and the stadium.
It's too bad we don't have a football team to go in there.
That's
what
we
do actually.
Well, we have UAB, yeah. I mean, you have the college football team. You're going to have the soccer team. Hopefully, can go in there as well at some point.
The Legion or the UAB soccer team?
Legion. I mean, I know they have a stadium over there, but I mean, every now and then you can come over there and play.
Oh, I think they could sell more seats if they wanted to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So they're going to outgrow that.
And I will tell you this: UAB will have. They will have better attendance at the new stadium, and not to mention the fact that the Iron had 15,000 people in the stands, and it was terrible weather every time that they played.
It was freezing.
It was So I think at this point, if you're looking at a nice fall afternoon, there are going to be people going down to that stadium. There's no doubt about it.
I will be one of them.
And then, not to mention, hopefully they try to get this open before the World Games.
Yep.
Because
I think they need it for the World Games.
I'm still kind of
the three-legged race, or
the tug of war.
The tug of war. They got to have a place for that. So
there's some weird games in the World Games. There's some really weird games.
If you guys don't know anything about the World Games, do yourself a favor and go look up.
So I'm looking it up now. I'm looking it up now because I got my laptop open. So because some of them are like, oh, I've played that game, and then it's like floorball. Like, what the hell is floorball?
I think it's hilarious because, like, really, it's literally like random I wouldn't even call they're literally games. They're not,
some of them are not that weird. Okay, some of them are not that weird.
they still do like ultimate frisbee or like disc golf or something like that.
So lacrosse, gymnastics, or
Okay, well, that's normal.
Korfball.
Korfball?
Right.
What?
I don't know, man.
I'm gonna
Squash.
Yeah, that's
Casting. I don't know what that is. Life saving.
How do you life-saving? Like, how do you...
Hey, man, I
don't want to lose
Yeah.
that.
Surfing, which I don't know how that's going to happen.
How...
Water ski and wakeboarding. So I'm guessing that's going to happen at the lake.
Yeah. How are they going to do surfing?
Maybe down at the beach?
I don't think... There's not a lot of surfing going on down at Gulf Shores.
I'm just saying. And there's other stuff as well. There's netball, powerlifting, racquetball, rugby, squash, sumo wrestling, which me and Patrick will be entering into competition for.
Can't wait.
Tug of war. Maybe we should get a tug of war team together.
I don't know that we would qualify. Like, where's the regional qualifier for the tug of war?
And then, of course, there's JD's favorite, which is the dance sports. So
apparently, korfball has similarities to netball. Also, don't know what that is. And basketball. So,
but there are some sports that I've heard, like baseball and softball. There's billiards and bowling.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you have darts? Like I might be.
I didn't see darts.
Like darts.
Handball, I've heard of. Hockey, karate, kickboxing, lacrosse. There's Muay Thai. I don't know what that is.
It's another martial art.
Martial arts. Yeah, racquetball, which I've played before. Rugby, climbing, squash, tug of war. Then there's a bunch of underwater sports as well. So anyway, the 21 again. Hopefully the stadium will be ready by then. I hope it is, so we can do some surfing at the new stadium.
That's korfball.
Korfball.
I'm looking at this thing. It's pretty hilarious. There's like it's literally like basketball, but it's like old school, like no backboard. There's just an actual basket on a stick. You're watching this.
Can we?
Right.
I'm gonna put a link to that on the show notes. All right. Well, let's take a break. Let's hear from our sponsor. Remember, we're going to be at Pepper Place this coming Saturday. I think 8 o'clock we'll start being there, right?
We'll start at 8. We'll probably be there till 10:30.
Yeah,
around there.
And if you see us, come by, say hello. And so let's hear from our sponsors. And then up next is our interview with Dr. Julian Maha of KultureCity. It was a good one, so stick around. Beecham Woodworks is a locally owned and operated wood shop in Birmingham, Alabama, specializing in custom furniture and small home goods. Chris and Kanan Beecham create a wide variety of unique pieces of all sizes, ranging from cutting boards to farmhouse tables. Using wood sourced from Alabama sawmills, Beecham Woodworks creates affordable quality pieces that will be a one-of-a-kind fixture for your home. So support your local woodworker and visit redmountainexpress.com/woodworks or check them out on their Facebook and Instagram accounts. Beecham Woodworks, turning your house into a home. And welcome back to the second half of the show. Our guest today is Dr. Julian Maha. He is the founder and CEO of KultureCity, a leading nonprofit recognized nationwide for using their resources to revolutionize and affect change in the community for those with sensory needs, such as autism. Since its founding, KultureCity has become not only one of the most best nonprofits in the United States, but has consistently reimagined how nonprofits should operate with consistent emphasis on impact technology.
It's a mouthful, Blake.
It is a mouthful. You're an ER doctor by trade, but
yes,
you
sir.
do KultureCity full-time now, and you're also an avid speaker on the speaker circuit. So we're glad to have you. Thank you for being with us.
No, thanks for having me. You guys have a great podcast.
Thank
Thrilled
you.
to be a part.
So
wait, so you?
No, go ahead.
I don't want to jump on you, Blake, but you're still a doctor full time, right?
Yes, I am.
So you're doing both of these things pretty much full time. That means there
Correct.
needs to be two
Still-
of you, right?
Yeah, I still have to pay the bills. You've seen the show Multiplicity?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So before we
You're
start
talking to a double right now.
Yeah.
so before we start talking about KultureCity and the great things you guys do, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how it is you came to Birmingham.
Yeah, sure thing. So, hold on. I am an ER physician by trade. I actually moved to Montgomery, Alabama in 1994.
That's where I'm from. So,
Really?
Yeah, I'm from Montgomery.
Hey, I tell you, Montgomery.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Montgomery?
Yeah.
So you know what I'm talking about. So in 1994, my sister, who's about 11 years older than I am, got a tennis scholarship to play in Auburn University, Montgomery back in the day.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my parents, who were both English teachers, really wanted me to have a better education. So when I was, how old was I? 14 or 15, I moved to Montgomery, and we lived on Smiley Court.
I know exactly where Smiley Court
Yes.
is.
Yeah. Unfortunately, our neighbor got killed the first night we moved in there.
Oh no.
So it was a very interesting introduction to the US of A for us, because we've never lived in the United States before that.
Surprised you didn't move
yeah.
back.
Well,
I know.
Just so for our
Yeah.
listeners who are not from Montgomery, Smiley Court is a very bad side of town.
Right.
It's off Air Base Boulevard. Wow, I did not know that. I mean,
Yeah. So lived in I got a scholarship actually to go to Montgomery Academy at that time. Grew up in Montgomery, and then after that went to medical school in Canada, and then moved back to the South because I love Montgomery, Alabama and Smiley Court so much that I had to come back near. No, but I really love the South. I think, the South is something that I think gets a bad rap nationally, but I think when you live here, you understand how beautiful it is and how genuine the people are and how great the opportunity is here. And for me, it was kind of a no-brainer to come back south to really start my medical career. And I actually worked in Montgomery. I worked in the Baptist system there, and I still
my
do.
mom works at Baptist South.
Yeah. Yeah, so small world.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
How long did you live in Montgomery? Like up until you graduated high school in Montgomery?
So I officially left Montgomery in 2005. So obviously I moved away from med school and came back.
Right.
But officially moved to Birmingham in 2005.
Okay.
Yeah, so my wife is a pediatric intensive care doctor. And she did residency in Jackson, Mississippi. And then in 2005, she came here to do a fellowship in ICU medicine, and that's when we moved to Birmingham. So we always joke that we are the two doctors that you never want to meet professionally, but hopefully socially. Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
So tell us about Culture City, and how did this get started? Because I know there's a story behind it.
Yeah, the story behind it is that, I think a lot of us get comfortable in life. When we're doing successfully, and everything's going fine, family health, all that is good, we get comfortable in life. And I think that was kind of what happened to my wife and I. And, we had our first son in 2007, and Abram was born, normal delivery, normal healthy child, no problems at all. And, we thought our future had been made and mapped out. We had all these great plans for him, where he was going to go to school, all that great stuff.
Right.
And he was doing great until age 2, when pretty much overnight he stopped communicating. Basically his speech went away, and we took him to all the doctors, and no one could give us an answer. Why? Because other than speech, everything else was the same. And all his tests were coming back fine. So it was kind of this year and a half of kind of looking for answers. Everyone told us, it's going to be fine. It's a stage. You guys are a multilingual family. Don't worry about it. But his behavior started to change as well. He developed some tics, things of that nature. And then finally, when he was 4, we got an appointment to Vanderbilt Hospital finally to see one of the top speech guys in the United States. And within about 5 minutes, kind of walking to this really tiny examination room, he pretty much told us that, hey, your kid's autistic. Looking at him now, he's never going to speak. Forget about him talking to you or saying mommy or daddy or I love you. And his behavior is only going to get worse, that you probably want to put him in an institution, when he was 6 years old. And that was really our introduction to the world of autism.
Right.
And
now you're both doctors. What
Right.
did y'all know about autism at
nothing.
that time? Yeah.
That's the thing. Autism in medical books is really this small paragraph that is the worst case scenario. And I never want to belittle someone, a death of someone, but it was really someone kind of akin to telling you that your child had died. Because when you have your child, you're about to have your child, you have all these hopes, dreams, aspirations.
Absolutely.
And when someone tells you that, you're like, wow, this is all done. I don't know where to go from here. And we almost went into this, I want to say, this week of mourning. But then there was this realization that came from it that Abram was still the same child that God had given us. Nothing fundamentally had changed.
Right.
All that someone had done was given him a diagnosis. But it was really kind of liberating at that point, because his future was wide open, because the world had written him off. He could do anything he wanted to do. The sky was literally the limit, because there was no societal expectation. We just needed to figure out how we could get the community to understand him, and he to interact with the community so that he could be in a position for success. And that kind of started us on a 2-year journey, and we started talking about it on social media. and very quickly started realizing that our story wasn't unique, which was amazing. But what was unique was the fact that we fortunately had the resources, and a lot of families did not. So that was the genesis of the kernel of the idea of KultureCity, where we wanted to fundamentally change the culture for our kids particularly, and how we could communicate that with the community at large. Yeah.
Wow, that's really amazing story of how this started. I mean, to get that diagnosis and then to turn around and turn it into, I want to do something about this. I want to change this. So tell us a little bit about, well, I feel like you've come a long ways from there to where you are now. We've talked about some of the stories on the show as far as what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how this developed over time and how you started doing some of these bigger projects that you guys are doing now.
Yeah, I think, for me, even though my background is in medicine, I've always had a big interest in startups and technology. And, before KultureCity began, I had always been asked to participate in nonprofits, either as a sponsor, a donor, or board member.
Right.
And I understood the social good portion of it, of what we were trying to do. What I hoped to also achieve was what I felt that was a fundamental weakness in the way nonprofits operated. And I felt that this was an opportunity on a KultureCity standpoint to really reinvent the way nonprofits as a whole did business. And that was really kind of the genesis of the business component of KultureCity. So when we started KultureCity, the first thing we wanted to do was make our mission statement very broad. As long as it fell under the realm of disabilities, we wanted to make it broad enough that we could do anything under that realm. Because, that is a fundamental weakness. Say, if you guys wanted to do, let's say, a nonprofit for helping entrepreneurs figure out podcasts, right? And that's your nonprofit. If, let's say, Blake, you had another great idea and say, hey, I want to also provide equipment for them. Because your mission statement says this, then you might not be able to do that.
Right.
So you would say, hey, Julian, that's a great idea. Why don't you go start your own nonprofit? So you have a proliferation at that point of all these kernels everywhere, and no one's working together for the general good. And that's why everyone's competing for a slice of the pie. So that was number one, to make the mission statement broad. Because when they did that, number one, we could affect change in multiple ways. And number two, we could consciously innovate our social good offerings, which was, really, really important from our standpoint.
So what you're saying is you didn't limit yourself like a lot of nonprofits do.
Exactly. Yeah. Because I think that's the biggest thing. And, when you look at a startup or an idea, Amazon started selling books, but that was not their grand scheme of ideas. Look at where they are now, because they're constantly being able to innovate. And when you innovate, I think that, number one, not only keeps you honest as the organization, but also engages your supporters and also really fundamentally helps you affect change in the lives of people that you're working with. So that was one of the big things. The other thing is really to operate it as lean as we could to get the right people that form the group. So, one of the things that people always have the misconception about is that, we get paid. So we only have one paid staff for KultureCity. Our executive director who lives in New York, and she makes $3,000 a month. And we have to rent at this office, which is $2,200. That's it.
Yeah.
Everyone else that you see here is working fundamentally because they believe in the cause and they're giving up their valuable time for this. It's what I call impact equity. We can't offer real equity, but we can offer tangible impact equity in what we are doing. So we view this as a very collaborative effort. Any ideas are free to, be thrown in the hat to see what works and what doesn't work. Yeah.
Well, speaking of impact, you showed us this map as we walked in of all these, or well, not all of yet, right? But a lot of the locations that are sensory inclusive that you guys have worked on. So as far as having an impact, I feel like you guys have really done that. You've had an impact, and it's visible in the places I go with my kids. Like I can go to the Birmingham Zoo,
right?
And there are sensory inclusive areas, and there are things there. I think it's really interesting to me the way that you've had this impact, but it's not just here in Birmingham. Like a lot of nonprofits, like you said, limit themselves with their mission statement, but they also seem to focus on a small area. Like, we want to do this in Birmingham. You guys have opened this up. Like you have a very broad approach to this, and I feel like you're looking at everything as if it's a target, or a possibility.
Yeah.
How do you define, like, how do you see this, and how do you limit yourself to what you're working on, because when there's all this opportunity out there.
Yeah, I think the right thing is to basically let the people that you serve dictate where you go. So for us, we haven't done any marketing at all with our sensory inclusion initiative. It's really been word of mouth. What we wanted to do was really create something that was a good product that was really helping people, and at the same time would also be able to grow and continue pushing the agenda of acceptance and inclusion, which is what we want to do. So, in terms of like limits, no, we've never set ourselves with a limit. We always try to figure out, can we do it before we say no to something?
Right.
I still remember, like Australia reached out to us, and, a year later we're talking with the whole Australian Football League to be sensory inclusive.
Wow.
And we have our first Australian team in Geelong.
Cool.
Now we have a team in Canada with the Toronto Blue Jays coming on. So our goal is really to always say never, and if we can figure it out, let's try to figure it out. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so for our viewers who maybe are not
Yeah.
familiar with Culture City, what is sensory inclusivity? And,
Yeah.
and how are y'all doing that throughout?
Yeah,
the
so when you talk about sensory needs, so obviously, my wheelhouse is autism. So this all kind of started actually locally at the Birmingham Zoo. At the Birmingham Zoo, we had a reach out from Dr. Foster, who was the former CEO of the Birmingham Zoo. And he approached us saying that, hey, we're getting a big request of basically kids with disabilities and even adults with disabilities wanting to be part of our Zubu. But we do not know how to integrate them because of the noises, the crowds, things of that nature. Can we work with you? So we said, well, let's try to figure out something. So we very quickly essentially planned a night where we shut the zoo down. And we opened it up to individuals with disabilities one night. We made it what we call sensory friendly.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go into that in just a minute. So what we saw from that night is that we had almost 800 people come out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I think, from the zoo's perspective, kind of two things went off. Number one, social good box, check. But number two, economical box. 80% of those people were not zoo members. There was an untapped population. So he said, wow, this was an amazing event. Can you guys scale this to a daily occurrence? And that was really the birth of sensory inclusion. So when you talk about sensory needs, so sensory needs are one where if you go to a public space, the lights, the noises, the crowds, even smells are not only overwhelming to an individual, but also physically painful. The thing that most people don't realize is that this affects 1 in 6 individuals in the United States today. Very high rates. So it's not only autism, it's PTSD, ADHD, adults that have had early onset strokes, early onset dementia. All of them have sensory needs. And it's a group by and large that's growing. It's the fastest growing demographic in the United States alone today. And most of them have what you call an invisible disability, because if you don't know any different, they look the same as you and I.
And do you think that's because we
Yeah.
just haven't identified it in the past and now
Right.
we're being made aware of it?
I think it's a combination. I think realistically, our world is getting noisier.
Mm-hmm.
I could,
I think that's
I
the
agree with
bottom
that.
line. Right. And I think that, as a society as a whole, there is definitely something going on. I think there's a definite increase in just understanding and identification of diagnosis. But as a whole, I think the numbers are actually going up. And I think also it's the recognition, because, back in the day, I think if you had anything like that, you would basically be one where you would probably stay at home and not go out and engage in the general public.
Right.
And that's still a case with a lot of our families. Imagine, with your children, if you had to pick and choose which child to take to an event, and you can take the other one because they had a sensory need, and you would just go by yourself, with your neurotypical child, and your other child to be left at home, not because they didn't want to go, but because they were not given the opportunity to go. And that's the scary thing. So when you look at, the rise of these numbers, that's the population we're dealing with. And going back to the whole sensory friendly movement, so now because of that understanding, you see more places trying to have sensory friendly events. So these are events where you have the smaller crowds, less noise, things of that nature. But obviously, when you think about it, it's not a solution, because it's going to alienate 80% of the population that comes to a zoo, that goes to see a basketball game. I mean, if you go to see a game, you don't want to have no music.
Right.
You don't have no crowd noise.
Right.
It's going to affect your fan, and then sooner or later you're not going to go. So the unfortunate thing is that limits accessibility to a particular date and event. My analogy is always like, if you're going to your favorite restaurant and you walk in and you have a loved one with you that's a sensory, and you say, hey, we would love to get seated. He has a sensory, she has a sensory. And the maitre d' tells you, hey, we'd love to seat you today. But it's really loud and crowded. Why don't you come back next Tuesday between 9 and 10 in the morning for our sensory-friendly dining hour?
Yeah, it's tough.
I mean, you're going to be mortified. You're like, well,
I'm hungry.
Sorry, we're not coming.
Right.
Yeah.
So imagine if you walked in and with sensory inclusion, they say, hey, we've been trained by KultureCity. We have sensory bags that have noise-canceling headphones, fidget tools. Anything you need, let us know. We're going to go ahead and seat you. That totally transforms, number one, the guest experience, but it changes accessibility to a daily occurrence rather than just one particular event. And that's the sensory inclusion initiative. Through training, sensory bags, creation of sensory rooms in certain spaces, and then integration with our app, it truly transforms not only the guest experience, but helps these families basically reunite with the community again.
So one of the things that y'all have become known for, where it kind of got our attention, was these sensory inclusive rooms that I think was at the airport where we first had the first story about it. Talk about those. Where are those, and what makes them sensory inclusive?
Yeah, so the biggest thing with spaces like the airports and all that is that obviously it is a very chaotic space, and sometimes traveling is stressful, right, for everyone.
For everybody.
Yeah, so what we did is what we try to do, identify in places like the airport or a sports arena is a space that's a little bit away from the hustle and bustle that we can then go in and make sensory inclusive. And what we do is we'll create really relaxing features like the bubble wall, which visually is relaxing. Right. We'll create tactile, like the tactile wall at the Birmingham airport. When you touch it, it's very calming because of the different textural elements there. Then we also have manipulative games that really help you take your mind off the stress that's there. But really, it's just a quiet place that you can take a break if the senses get a little too overwhelming, and then decompress, and then come back out and basically continue the rest of your day. Yeah.
That's really cool. So you mentioned some of the ones around Birmingham, but can you talk about some of the other ones you've done around the country, some of the bigger projects you've worked on?
I just want to say real quick that we were trying to get you on. This is always funny. I was like, so how about this day? He's talking with the Chicago Bulls. Okay, well.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
No, it's been a crazy month because, obviously April was Autism Month, or is Autism Month. Yeah. And so we've had a ton of launches. Yeah, so some of the bigger projects we worked in, the very first sensory inclusive room that we put in an NBA arena was with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Right. That actually room is now 3 years old. It's pretty crazy.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of hard to believe.
That's when LeBron was still there, right?
Right. That's when, hopefully they get Zion. So we'll see. But, since then we have rooms in Oklahoma City, San Diego. We just put 2 in Dallas, in Houston in the MLS stadium there, and the San Antonio Spurs. Atlanta has one at State Farm Arena with the Hawks. Obviously, Birmingham has one, not only at the airport, but McWayne. Right. McWayne has one. We've done a few in schools as well, too. So it's one that grows significantly. Obviously, from our standpoint, a room is great, but our goal is that they never be used, because if we do our job right with the training and with the sensory bags, then there's no need for a room. So our genuine hoops, the room is a great adjunct, but it's obviously not the be all end all.
So you've mentioned the sensory bags a couple of times.
What's
in those?
So those are basically bags that have noise cancelling headphones. They have certain fidget tools that help you really focus on the event that you're watching on hand. And then they also have a KCVIP lanyard that basically kind of tells the guest experience team that, hey, someone that has that lanyard or someone in that party might have a sensory need.
Right.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about some of the training you do, because I think actually Paper Doll was one of the first places we talked about you guys doing this.
Yeah.
What kind of training do you give to a staff that's looking to be more sensory inclusive?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think a quick shout out to Paper Doll is necessary, because when Paper Doll first approached us, and that just shows the bias that exists in our society. So I have a son, and when Paper Doll approached KultureCity and they approached our team, I was like, why on earth would a bar want to be sensory inclusive? That was my initial reaction. Right. So can you imagine? I'm in the movement and I still have a bias.
Right.
So when I sat down with them, they explained to me that, hey, we have adults on the spectrum. We have military vets with PTSD that come in for a drink, and they have sensory needs, and we want to serve that population. I was like, wow. My sincere apologies, my bias showed in that. So, kudos to them for recognizing that and wanting to do this. But to go into the training, our training is basically something that we designed for anyone who has not finished high school to a C-level executive.
Okay.
And basically what it covers is, number one, what sensory needs are. Number two, why you should care about it. Number 3, what your venue is going to be doing to become sensory inclusive. Number 4, what to do when you see someone in the midst of a sensory overload.
Right.
So those are kind of the 4 main areas that we cover in that training. Yeah.
So just a question. I'm asking this selfishly.
No.
Is that training available to anyone? And
So yeah,
publicly?
we have not so far. In all honesty, I mean, we get a lot of requests for it, but it's something that we're thinking of, strongly down the road of opening it up. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Is there any like segment of the maybe the workforce, the population that you haven't tapped into yet that you're wanting to?
Yeah. So the question is that it's interesting because this movement continues to grow. Like, to give you an example, we had our prison system reach out to us.
Oh wow.
Exactly. I mean, who
Yeah,
would have
you
thunk it,
wouldn't
right?
have thought it,
but
but-
it makes sense.
Yes.
It's the whole South Carolina prison system, and they want to be sensory inclusive. We've had workplace like WeWork. We have long talks with their CEO about making every workspace sensory inclusive. Today we had a good chat with Ship because they're thinking about making their workspace sensory inclusive.
Shout out to Matt.
Yeah.
Matthew, our other guy, works at Shift.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So it's very interesting. Like, I don't think we've even reached the tip of the iceberg for this. I think this is a movement that continues to grow. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems
Yeah.
like the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, I know.
When you're trying to change an entire society,
Correct.
you've got a
Yeah.
lot of work to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how people can help with that. How can
Yeah.
people help Culture City achieve more and do more?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, I think definitely right now, becoming sensory inclusive, if you have a business, I think definitely makes sense. And even if it's something, as you just said, you haven't thought about, I think it will definitely affect positive change, at least in one person, if you're a traditional office to a restaurant or whatever. And that's the beauty of this whole thing. So I think that's number one. Reach out to us and talk to us about becoming sensory inclusive. We've worked with anyone from churches to library systems to prison systems now to obviously the bigger venues, restaurants, things of that nature. So anything that you think about, if you have a genuine interest for it, reach out to us and we can work with you on it. Volunteering, when we build sensory rooms, we always need volunteers. That's a great way. And then obviously traditionally, growing the brand by, talking about it with the people that you work. And one of the new initiatives that we just started is something called a community dinner.
Okay.
And the goal of that is really to host a dinner and invite someone with a disability or with a loved one with a disability to that dinner. Because a lot of us never get invited anyway. And it's a great way to promote that message of acceptance and inclusion through the community by hosting a dinner.
That's a really cool idea.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, where can our listeners find out more information about Culture City and the great work that you guys are doing?
Definitely our website and www.culturecity.org, but also download our app. It's a free app on Apple and Android. And then always check us out on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter.
And we were told when we
Yeah,
came in here.
we walked into this
Yeah.
amazing podcast recording space
Yeah.
with all this fancy equipment that made our equipment look kind of shabby. Tell us about what you're doing with that. You're having a new podcast, right?
Yeah, so Colton, who is on our media team, had this idea about doing a really cool podcast to talk to really anyone and talking to them about the importance of acceptance, inclusion, and diversity in what they're doing. So it's called Creator with a K. And it's going to be dropping pretty soon.
Yeah, he said there's it's like a soft drop right now.
Yeah.
We'll make sure we plug that as
Yeah,
soon as it goes
yeah.
out to everybody else.
Exactly.
That's
We need to have y'all on.
great.
Hey, that'd be great.
We'll flip
We'd love
the
to.
script.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'd love to.
Because
Have
I'd love to know your story. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
No, thanks for
This
having me.
was we
Yeah.
wanted to do this interview for a very long time.
thank you.
and
Definitely.
We were definitely
Yeah.
going to do anything we could to get you on. So, but that's going to wrap up this edition of the Red Mountain Express. We want to thank Julian for being with us today. Remember, you can find out more about them at KultureCity.com or .org.
Yeah.
We also remind our listeners that we're going to be at the market at Pepper Place this weekend, April 13th. We'll be recording a special episode as well as talking to some of the farmers at the market. And we'll have a table set up, so please stop by and say hello. Remember, you can like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you can also go by redmountainexpress.com to access the show notes and links to our stories that we end up featuring. For Matthew Joyner, J.D. Baker, Patrick Tucker, I'm Blake Westbrook. We'll see you next week.